Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. Today in the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the concept of release and let God in a little different way. In this show, we will be discussing the difference between spiritual and material identity. Listen as Swami explains surrender as impersonalization, more as the unfolding of the true sense of being instead of a giving up, because two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. Live by the sword and die by the sword. Live by grace and live forever. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and perceive yourself spiritually. Swami, I see the title of today's show is Surrendering Personal Sense of Life. Can you tell us what you think that means?
Well, I think what we're focusing on here is the biblical concept of putting off the old man. I think the question that we want to ask is, why do we have to put off the old man? And then we want to know, what does it look like when I'm doing it? To answer this question, I have a few quotes from Herb Fitch that I thought I'd want to share with you. And the first one here, and these are from Herb Fitch, Revelation of St. John, Class 2A, beginning of the quote, "And now you find you have intensified your probing to find out where you are failing. You have gone too far to turn back, and yet you haven't gone far enough. And you find that you haven't died to yourself. You have accepted that you are the spirit, but you have not accepted that you are not the human being. And so you are trying to be both, the spirit and the human being." And this is what I really think we want to focus on, this concept of understanding ourselves spiritually. Because exactly what does that mean? And like we said earlier, what does that look like when I do it? Because the path in yoga, this union with the divine, has an evidence procedure. And what we're basically doing is we're coming from a belief in two powers into the understanding of only one divine life. That was what was referred to as transformation. And in order for us to do that, you can't hang on to the belief in two powers and now accept the belief in one power. So the concept of release and let God really corresponds more with the Christian concept of what Jesus would say, I and the Father are one. Jesus doesn't say, I and the Father are two. In order for us to understand, why would I want to do that? Because I want to come out of the law of karma. I want to come out of a false sense of life, and I want to live in the truth of my being.
Well, just for some clarification, that last line in that Herb Fitch quote, and again, I'll repeat it, you have accepted that you are the spirit, but you have not accepted that you are not the human being. So you are trying to be both, the spirit and the human being. Now, in the opening, I said, two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. Would that be a good example of that saying?
Yeah, that's what we've been talking about since the inception of Institute for Personal Development, which is the physics of spirituality, that like attracts like. Even the term impersonalization that we use really implies a crucifixion of this personal sense of self. that there can't be a me and a omnipresent supreme being. That if it's omnipresent, it's everywhere, it's infinite, it's eternal. And the whole concept of being human and mortal and finite can't be the creation of this divine principle. And so it relies on belief for its existence. Now, if we believe that we are a human being, then we believe in two powers. And we're under the law of karma. We're in the cycle of death and rebirth. Everything that we do in yoga is about liberation from this regressive pattern. But in order to do it, we have to transform. In that process of transformation, we have to let go of this false belief. It's just like a caterpillar when it becomes a butterfly. It is no longer a caterpillar and it can't go back. And the same with the human in this adult state. The human in spiritual identity loses that false sense of who they thought they were and then accepts this larger sense of life that is the belief in only one power, one life. And that's what being spiritual implies.
Well, this is probably a good place to talk about that next Herb Fitch quote, which is, "The child of God has no human identity. It has a human appearance." So maybe you could break that down for us.
Yeah, we've been talking more and more about the divine idea, the divine creation. We got most of this from Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy's discovery, which she got from interpreting the Bible a little bit more accurately than traditional orthodoxy has interpreted it. But she talks about Genesis 1, which is the divine creation, which is the truth of being, that this divine life created a perfect world, which Jesus called thy kingdom. And then Genesis 2, there's this secondary creation, which is kind of like this man-made concept of the divine creation. And so traditional religion works from Genesis 2, the story of Adam and Eve and the fall from Eden in the Bible, and they kind of bypass Genesis 1, which is the divine creation. But we really need that. And so to be the child of God means that you're accepting yourself as the image and likeness of the divine, which is spiritual. Now, the human appearance, the secondary creation, is just a thought about the divine creation, and if it is understood correctly, then you understand it for what it is. But if you don't have the divine idea, if you do not have identity with the divine creation, and you are accepting the false sense of who you are, then you have your back to the divine creation. You're basically unconscious to the divine law, and then you reside under this law of karma, the belief in two powers. We do that until we, quote unquote, awaken or we realize the truth.
I think it's time to actually go to the next Herb Fitch quote, if you like. And that one is, "There is no divine omnipotence except in divine life."
Right, and that's what we're kind of talking about. We approach our lives with the belief that I am a physical body with a mind and perchance a soul. But if you accept spiritual identity, that there is but one life, and you have accepted that you are the light of that life, you are the reflection of that one divine life, which is perfect, eternal, unchanging, whole, because that's where the power is. If you believe that you are a human, then you are basically in the trap. In the Bible where it says, "Ask in my name, and it shall be given to you," The interpretation of my name is my likeness. If you are in spiritual identity, if you understand yourself to be the reflection of this creative principle, then you are in a position to communicate with it. From that level of understanding of yourself, you have what is promised in Genesis 1, dominion over this world. But if you still believe that you are a finite mortal being with an expiration date, and you believe that you are separate from that creative principle, and you are asking that creative principle to do something for you as a finite mortal being, then you're going to find that it's hit or miss. But if you understand the physics of spirituality and you have accepted yourself to be the reflection of an indestructible principle, which requires what we are calling here now surrendering personal sense and accepting that you are the one divine life. And from that perspective, you have dominion, you have omnipotence.
Well, I'd like to talk more about that word surrender or surrendering. I looked up on the dictionary online, and the verb definition of surrender is cease resistance to an enemy or opponent and submit to their authority. So we can kind of see how we can take that definition and apply it to spiritual science.
Right. But we have to understand that we have to come out of the belief in two powers. We have to come out of this concept that there is a me and many. And being spiritual, surrendering to that, is accepting that you are one. I've heard that saying that if God is your co-pilot, you may be sitting in the wrong seat. That to me is more of human advice, because there's not really a transformation. That spirit translates everything into itself. Spirit is the dissolving force of this universe. And what Scripture is suggesting here is that we have to come out of thinking about God or thinking about a higher power and living out from this divine creative principle as identity. Even the word individual means not divided, that we are one with this divine creative principle. And then, how would I know if what I'm calling spirit or God or universe, however you want to define this one life, how do you know that what you're calling that one life is the one true life that they're talking about in Scripture? Spirit testifies with deeds. In order for us to identify with it, we must live before thought and above corporeal sense. And then we have to correct what is appearing in our corporeal senses, which was the message of the Christ: to heal, to reform, to raise, to preach. That's how you would know. There was no longer a personal will, but you were now that place where the divine will expressed itself through you and revealed its perfect law.
Well, we're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. So listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments.
Snow. That's what we or, it's like you wake up one morning, it's like, you know what? I'm tired.
Kriya Yoga Theory 2 is a unique and revolutionary practice and forum designed to facilitate the growth process in human development. Apotheosis is a real experience and has an evidence procedure. You cannot lead someone to permanent change by doing for them what they must do themselves. Personal accountability and responsibility are the foundation of Kriya Yoga Theory 2. You must be engaged and devoted. Prana power brings virtue to overcome fear, wisdom to overcome ignorance, purpose to overcome selfishness, enthusiasm to overcome laziness. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. These sessions are a celestial positioning system to guide the individual into union with the divine. For more information or to sign up for your next session online, go to www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, getting back to the word surrender, I wanted to get other people's take on what they thought surrender means. And I got this from the site sacredfemininawakening.com. And she says, surrender means letting go of what, how, when, and who. The divine is in charge anyway, so when we surrender, we give up the obstacles we are putting in the way by trying to take the control out of the divine hands and into our own. We let go of it all, what we perceive to be good, bad, right, wrong, helpful, or limiting. And just maybe wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that, but it's to what degree am I willing to surrender? Because in order to do what they're suggesting there, you have to give up personal sense. You have to understand that the testimony of your five senses, what is good, bad, right, wrong, time and space, all of this must go. And the only way that you can really let it go is by stop thinking with a five-sense corporeal mind, that we have to graduate to divine mind and to see the absolute. In yoga, we use the term detachment. In the Yoga Sutras, the suggestion is continuous restraint of the thought variations and constant practice of detachment. In order to do that, you must understand that you can't just stop thinking and you can't just let go, but you must be attached to something. And having this concept of a divine idea, having a concept of one life isn't good enough, because you must have a direct relationship with this. Otherwise, you are a human thinking about spirit, as opposed to living and moving and having your being in this one divine life, in this divine creation that is right here, right now. And how do I know I'm letting go of a belief in matter and I am now accepting spiritual identity? Because if you're not proving it, if your life is still showing signs of sin, sickness, suffering, lack, limitation, and yet you believe that you're spiritual, you believe that I am letting God run my life, but you're still working with a concept of God, which for most of us, our concept of God includes that God created everything, that God created this world, sin, sickness, suffering, death. And so you're still in the trap. And without the truth, without knowing the divine creation, without knowing that God is perfect, God is whole, God is eternal. And in order for me to know God, I need to know myself in the way that God created me, which means that I have to know myself spiritually as a whole, eternal, unchanging, incorporeal being. Which, sure, they're suggesting that, but are they demonstrating it? That becomes the question that we're working with, because most people talk spirituality. I did it for 30 some odd years. When you find you're in a situation where what you're doing isn't working, and unless you have this type of information that you can troubleshoot what you're doing, to turn within, to know the difference between human conjecture and this absolute truth. Because that's one of the things in the Yoga Sutras that we work with, avidya, ignorance. We're mistaking the impermanent, the unreal, for the permanent, the real.
Swami, I have another definition for surrender, and this is relating to surrender and spirituality from Wikipedia. And they state, surrender in spirituality and religion means that a believer completely gives up his own will and subjects his thoughts, ideas, and deeds to the will and teachings of a higher power. Surrender is willful acceptance. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, again, I agree with it. What we really want to focus on here is, what does that look like when I'm doing it? Because like I said, surrender may be detachment in yoga, something that comes from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. Mary Baker Eddy says, quote, "But thought loosened from a material basis, but not yet instructed by science, may become wild with freedom, and so be self-contradictory." That was from page 552. That's an important thing that she's talking about here, because we don't just let go. Thought loosened from a material basis, but not yet instructed by science. We must know this divine mind. We must let divine mind take over the scientific government of our being. Without that in the equation, how do I know the difference between my will and thy will? And again, if we're not using the testimony of our senses, if we're not using the appearance to give us clues as to how we're thinking, even say, for example, in Kriya Yoga, we use the physical body because your body is a thought image. Your body is your thought about this divine idea. And if you can work with thought and belief, which is something that we were doing for years with, you can change finite bad to finite good. But it's not the goal of yoga. In order to get the goal of yoga, which is liberation from the belief of being finite, you're going to need reunion with the creative principle, with this spiritual sense of being. And we do that with practice.
Well, I see we have another quote here from Mary Baker Eddy in Science and Health that gets us a little deeper into the truth. Should we talk about that?
Yeah, this was from page 114. Christian Science explains all cause and effect is mental, not physical. It lifts the veil of mystery from soul and body. It shows the scientific relation of man to God, disentangles the interlaced ambiguities of being, and sets free the imprisoned thought. In divine science, the universe, including man, is spiritual, harmonious, and eternal. Science shows that what is termed matter is but the subjective state of what is termed by the author mortal mind. In order to go from my will to thy will, there must be a complete annihilation of personal sense, the crucifixion of the body. Then you must have the resurrection and the reunion with the Father. Now, surrender here is translated into I and the Father are one, not two. Only one, which means no me, and but only one divine life. And that doesn't mean I'm spiritual and you're not. Because from that sense of awareness, there is only one. The I of my being is the I of all being. Now, from there, you're living completely above corporeal sense. You're living out from your spiritual senses. And that's what they're talking about.
So, Swami, I went on the Bible app and I typed in the word surrender in the search function, and it came up with Romans 12:1. Maybe this would be a good place to talk about that.
Yeah, I'll read Romans 12:1. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by renewing your mind. Ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Yeah, see here, I really like where they're saying, may prove that perfect will of God. The concept of healing means to be whole, but all healing is the revealing of the divine creation. We can live before thought and above corporeal sense, but unless we are correcting these appearances, then there's a good chance that what we're calling God isn't God, or that we have accepted that we're spiritual, but we haven't let go of the fact that you are a mortal being. And so these are the obstructions. This is the veil that prevents us from seeing the truth, which is the divine creation. And this is all translated as thinking differently. That we forsake these modes of mortal thinking using our 5 corporeal senses, and we are now cultivating spiritual sense. We are now thinking with the mind of God, divine mind, which thinks in terms of the absolute. It only sees its perfect creation. And science backs this, that science is saying that reality as we know it is observation dependent. How we think is what we become, but if we continue to think with this limited 5-sense corporeal mind, then we're in the trap, because mortal mind cannot bring forth the divine image.
Well, you reminded me of a curiosity I had in the opening where we said, live by the sword and die by the sword, live by grace and live forever. I'm thinking that maybe the sword is supposed to represent the mortal, material aspect of our lives, and then living by grace would be the divine omnipresent?
Right. If you sow to the flesh and you live out from this world, then you're going to die. But if you sow to the spirit and you live in the kingdom of heaven on earth, then you have eternal life.
And so maybe one more clarification in the opening. At the very end, we said, perceive yourself spiritually. And what would you like us to take from that?
Well, again, we must know ourselves in the way that we're created. We must understand that we are the reflection of this indestructible divine principle, this law. And we have to start to rebuke the testimony of our 5 senses. We can't just live by the appearances. In the Bible, it says not to judge by appearances. So we cultivate spiritual sense, this part of ourselves that is perfectly healthy, whole, complete, eternal, unchanging. And to identify with that and to know that that is who you are, because your fidelity to that truth will begin to have a profound effect on your appearance.
Well, now it's time to start closing down the show for today, so listeners, be sure to visit the website, www.ipdtransform.com. Once you're on the homepage and you see the fading banner and it says Blog Talk Radio Show, you can click that. That directs you to the Blog Talk Radio Show catalog page. And then don't forget clicking on the products tab, and then online classes directs you to all the classes that Swami has available for you. So with that, Swami, any final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join our Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and perceive yourself spiritually. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.